You've been told all your life that women are divine. They told you women have hearts that heal, that they love deeper, purer, softer, and that they're the answer to the chaos in your life. You believed it because, well, everyone else did. From the moment you were a boy, the stories were there. She was the prize, the angel, the mother, the muse. And you? What were you? The one chasing, the protector, the fool on his knees, offering himself up just to be close to her. But what if all of that, all those ideas, that myth you've built your life around, was not only false but designed to keep you blind? What if the woman you love isn't the missing piece of you, but a reflection of a deeper misunderstanding? Aristotle, he didn't romanticize it. He didn't drape womanhood in the shiny fabric of poetry. Instead, he looked at nature, stripped of all those myths. No filters, no fantasies, and what he saw rocked the very foundation of the fairy tale. Aristotle said it plainly, not out of malice, but as an observation about biology, a truth of nature, not morality. And here's the thing, nature doesn't lie. Now let's shift gears. This isn't just about biology. It's about what that truth does to the illusions you hold. Because let me ask you this. What if love in its rawest form isn't mutual at all? What if it's just a hierarchy dressed up like devotion? What if, when you say you're in love, what you're really doing is kneeling at the altar of your own idealization? You don't really see her, do you? No, you see the part of you that wants healing. You think she's nurturing. Maybe she is, but maybe she's mirroring something you crave, something that gives her control over you. You think she's soft. Look closer. That softness? It's a performance. Not always manipulative, not always, but still a performance. And why? Because if Aristotle is right, everything she does, everything she is, it's shaped around what you want her to be. Not because she's weak, not because she's dishonest, but because that's how nature has shaped her. Adaptive, strategic, emotionally fluid, a shapeshifter. Because when you're not the center, when you're not the default, you learn to survive by bending to the dominant form. And in a man's world, women bend, not out of love, but out of necessity. So now ask yourself, when you look at her, what are you really seeing? A person? Or a projection? A partner? Or a placeholder for your unresolved hunger? You don't want a woman. You want the idea of her. And she knows it. And that's her power. She doesn't need to dominate you. She just needs to reflect you. And once she does, once she becomes the echo chamber for your emotional fantasy, you fall. You surrender. Not because she's powerful, but because you gave her that power. Not because she's divine, but because you're lost. And once you've surrendered, once you've handed over your identity in exchange for that reflection, what's left of you? You think you're loving. You think you're giving. But what if all you're doing is bargaining? Offering your masculinity at the altar of approval, hoping she'll look at you and say, "You're enough." But what if she never meant to say that? What if she doesn't even see you? Only the version of you she can shape. Here's where things get a little darker. She's not looking for truth. She's looking for advantage, not out of cruelty, but by design. While you speak in vulnerability, she listens for strategy. While you offer your past like a confession, she listens for leverage. Not because she's evil. She's not the origin. She's the response, the echo, the adjustment. You think that makes her less? It doesn't. Because when someone doesn't have power and structure, They master power in subtlety. You call her emotional, but what if she's surgical? You think she's feeling, she's scanning. Every smile, every silence, every slight movement you make. She registers it like a code. She had to master one thing: how to become indispensable to the very man who, unknowingly, fears her difference. And that's what you don't see. Your love isn't love. It's dependency. And her love, it's not care. It's calibration. She doesn't need to overpower you. She just needs to become essential, the voice in your head before you make a decision, the comfort you crave after you fall, the approval you chase like it's oxygen. And you call that romance? That's obedience wrapped in poetry. But here's the kicker. Don't blame her. She didn't create this game. She learned it. She mastered it. While men were building systems, women were building survival. You conquered the outer world with war and steel. She conquered the inner world with softness and suggestion. Not because she was weak, but because she was watching, learning, adapting. She doesn't want to dominate your body. She wants to occupy your mind. And she does. She lives in your hunger. She lives in your guilt. She lives in your need to be wanted. That's not love. That's control so refined, so invisible, that you call it chemistry. So subtle, you call it fate. But fate doesn't track your flaws. She does. She remembers what makes you feel small. She remembers how you talk when you're unsure. She learns your rhythm, your volume, your vocabulary, because every detail you offer is another doorway into your self-worth. You thought she was fragile. She's not. She's a tactician. You thought she needed protection. She didn't. She needed proximity. You thought she was waiting for you. No, she was watching you. Watching how much of yourself you were willing to give away in exchange for the idea of being loved. And once she saw that weakness, you were no longer a man in her eyes. You were a resource, a means, not to hurt you, but to center herself. And here's where things get really interesting. She doesn't move toward you. She moves around you. She flows. She adapts. She doesn't demand power. She becomes the thing that power needs. That's not love. That's evolution. And evolution doesn't care about your feelings. So here you are, worshiping softness, kneeling before strategy, and still wondering why you feel so hollow. Why you give and still feel unseen. It's because you're not loving a woman. You're loving the story you've written about her. The tragedy is, she knows it. She knows it, and she plays it. Because that story benefits her more than the truth ever could. Why would she correct your illusion when it hands her influence without confrontation? Why would she dismantle the pedestal you built for her when that pedestal lets her rule without being seen as a ruler? You call her a mystery. You call her feminine. You say she's hard to understand. But there's nothing mysterious about it. You just don't want to see the clarity hiding behind the comfort. She isn't hiding. You're just refusing to look. Because the moment you admit that her kindness might be a calculation, that her tenderness might be a tool, that her affection might be a mirror, not of your worth, but of her will, you'll have to admit something else. That the version of you she reflects is a lie you needed more than you ever needed love. She doesn't need to deceive you with words. You've already deceived yourself with meaning. She simply adapts to the role you cast her in. And when she no longer needs you, when the utility ends, When your usefulness expires, the role ends too. And that's when you say she changed, that she stopped loving you, that she grew cold, but maybe she didn't change at all. Maybe she just stopped pretending. Maybe she just stopped feeding the version of herself that kept you emotionally obedient. And here you are, confused, broken. Not because she left, but because your reflection left with her. You didn't lose love. You lost the part of yourself that only existed through her approval. And now you're empty. Because you were never whole to begin with. You were a man stitched together by the attention of a woman who knew exactly how to give just enough to keep you chasing and just little enough to keep you insecure. That's not her fault. That's yours. Because you built your self-worth around her gaze. And when she stopped looking, your identity collapsed. Aristotle wasn't trying to attack women. He was describing nature. But you can't stand that kind of clarity, can you? You'd rather be seduced than confronted. You'd rather be needed than real. You'd rather be loved through illusion than be seen through truth. But she sees. She always saw. She saw how badly you needed her to be perfect, how desperately you wanted to be enough. And she used it, not maliciously, but instinctively. Because when you're the imperfect man, as Aristotle would say, when your form is reaction, not creation, your strength becomes the mastery of perception. You must learn how to manipulate attention, how to provoke emotion, how to center yourself through vulnerability. And when you do it well, he won't even notice. He'll call it fate. He'll call it magic. He'll call it love. But it's not magic. It's measurement. She is not mysterious. She's meticulous. Every pause, every tear, every gesture, it's not random, it's deliberate. She's not emotionally lost. She's emotionally literate. She knows the grammar of your heart better than you do. And she edits you, silently, strategically, until you're speaking her script without even realizing you forgot your own. And this is where men break. This is where the illusion becomes unbearable. Because at some point, the cracks start showing. The pedestal begins to wobble. You start noticing that she doesn't admire you. She manages you. That she doesn't uplift you. She rearranges you. And when you resist, when you reclaim, when you say no, she pulls back. Not because she's hurt, but because control has slipped. And without control, there is no leverage. And without leverage, there is no intimacy. Because in her world, intimacy isn't connection. It's choreography. And you've been dancing to her rhythm without even knowing the music was hers. You danced because it felt like love. Because it felt familiar. Because the myth of her grace wrapped itself around your loneliness, like silk around skin. But it wasn't grace. It was gravity. You didn't fall in love. You fell into orbit, around her moods, around her needs, around her silence, around her reactions. And you thought that meant closeness. But closeness without clarity is just captivity. And you've been captive so long, you've mistaken the cage for connection. You used to have edges, opinions, direction, but now you find yourself hesitating, censoring, folding yourself into versions that won't upset her. You say it's because you love her, but real love doesn't ask for self-erasure. Real love doesn't punish authenticity. And if the cost of her affection is your voice, your will, your spine, then what you have isn't a relationship. It's a rehearsal for obedience. And still, you defend her. Still, you tell yourself she's just misunderstood, that she's complicated, that she's been hurt. But maybe the real truth, the one that burns quietly beneath your rationalizations, is that she's not confused at all. She's clear, crystal clear. She knows what she's doing. She knows what she wants. And she knows exactly what part of you she has to touch to get it. You think she's emotionally raw? She's emotionally precise. You think she's overwhelmed? She's calculating. Every outburst, every breakdown, every retreat. Those aren't weaknesses, they're tools. Because in a system where the male is power and the female is deviation, the only way to win is to make him hand over his power willingly. And you did. You gave it up like a gift, thinking it made you noble. But it didn't. It made you predictable. And predictable men are easy to break. So when she pushes your buttons, it's not by accident. She's been mapping those buttons since day one. Every compliment, a probe, every "I love how honest you are," a calibration. She doesn't want your soul. She wants your pattern. Because once she knows it, she owns it. And the moment she owns it, she owns you. And you call that intimacy? But that's not intimacy. That's influence masquerading as love. You might think she's nurturing your wounds. But what if she's memorizing them? Because in her world, whoever knows where it hurts controls when it hurts. So you stay silent, because speaking up would mean shattering the illusion. The fear of confronting the truth is greater than losing her. The pedestal you've put her on is no longer a tribute, it's a stage. And you? You've been performing the entire time. This isn't a condemnation of women. This is the natural truth that Aristotle saw. We've been taught to romanticize relationships, to view women as these ethereal beings, pure, soft, nurturing. But that's just an illusion. When you were taught that love is this perfect mutual connection, it was always more about your need for validation, your need to feel like you belong, that you're enough. You wanted her to complete you, and she let you believe that. But now, it's time to confront the fact that she was never your salvation. She was the mirror of your deep-seated needs. You might say, but she loved me. Well, what if that love wasn't about devotion, but about adaptation? She doesn't need to overpower you. She simply becomes indispensable. She becomes the thing you can't live without, the approval you chase like air, the comfort you crave after a fall. That's not love, it's dependency. And that, my friend, is where your identity got lost, in the need for her reflection. Aristotle's harsh truth was never meant to attack women. He simply observed nature as it is. And maybe it's time for you to stop romanticizing that illusion, to stop clinging to a version of love that was shaped by your needs. When you stand alone, when the fantasy crumbles, and you no longer have that false reflection to validate your existence, you are left to confront the truth of who you are. The question is, can you face that truth? Can you see the reality of your own identity without needing her to be the mirror for it? Because until now, you have been living in a fantasy, a world where her approval dictated your worth. But real love doesn't come from validation. It comes from self-acceptance. It comes from standing on your own, free of illusion and free of the need for external confirmation. So now, you're left with the silence, the absence. And that silence, that's the foundation, the truth. When you stop chasing illusions, you begin to rebuild yourself. The myth dies, and in its place, something raw begins to take shape. Because here's the reality. You didn't lose love. You lost the part of yourself that only existed because of her. And now, You're standing in the ruins of your own delusion, unsure of who you are without her. But this isn't the end. It's the beginning.